All right, I appreciate everyone being here today. This is the ETHDenver pop-up event. It's just one night only. So yeah, I know people are here from all over the country, over the world, so I appreciate you spending your time here at the ArtBlocks event. To kick things off, before we start up the panel, I'm going to bring on Snowfro, who is the creator, founder of ArtBlocks. He's going to give a few minutes.
Thank you, sir. Can you hear me? Yeah? Welcome, everybody. Thank you very much for coming. Before I say anything, I just want to say huge thanks to Ponyo, everybody that's been in Denver helping out. We have a couple community members that are helping out. Scott's back there somewhere, and then the ArtBlocks team that flew in to help. So thank you, everybody. And thanks to the gallery for letting us take over your space. Much appreciated. So I'm incredibly humbled to be able to speak to this many people. It seems to be something that happens more and more often. And sometimes in crypto we see these kind of crazy cycles, and you think, okay, this could be like the first time I got to speak to people in Marfa. I was like, okay, well, this could be that one time that we get to talk to everybody. But then next week, no one's going to give a shit about this anymore. The more that these happen, the less I feel that way. And I think for a lot of people that know me, I have a big imposter syndrome in this space and in art and in as a tech founder. And so it's really beautiful that more and more of these things happen. I get to talk to more and more people, and all that's doing, I am grateful for you guys, because what that's doing is it's helping me believe more, even though I believe in this, more in what we're doing and the long-term vision. So thank you all for coming. What I want to just say is a little story of what I think about DAOs versus what I used to think about DAOs, because we're going to have a conversation about DAOs today. Pri and Aaron, I think it was Pri, reached out from Flamingo DAO early on in the ArtBlocks thing and said, hey, we're buying a lot of squiggles. And I was like, okay, they could go to zero, so just, I don't know, be careful, whatever. And then Pri came back and said, we're part of this DAO. It's called Flamingo DAO. And I was like, oh, man, DAO is a lot of people are doing these DAO things, but it just didn't quite feel right. And I feel like we were talking to robots on the other side of the internet. And then I met Aaron and Pri and Chris on a video call. This is after years of being in crypto, hidden behind the word Snowfro and really not having human contact, and realized that they are actually humans and very intelligent humans. And that is, I guess, was revolutionary for me. We were all degens in the CryptoPunks Discord for 4 years, just waiting for the alien to come. And never really knew anybody, just by their screen name. And I was kind of anti-DAOs, and they have completely just blown my mind with the structure, the professionality, the legality, and just the passion that they have for what they're doing. So there's a couple more that are going to be represented here today, which is really exciting. And I think that we can all thank Aaron and Pri and the rest of Flamingo and the Lao and Open Law for the fact that we can even have this conversation. I really think that they are the innovators in this space. There's Pri. Literally, they are the innovators. They're the ones that are going to make this possible for everybody, and it just gives me a lot of satisfaction to introduce everybody. So, well, Ponyo, are you going to introduce people? Yeah. Or do you? Okay, I'll let you do that. So, anyways, thank you guys very, very much for coming, and see you soon. Thank you.
Yeah, if y'all want to take a seat, we'll go ahead and get started. And this will be universal. How are y'all doing? All right. Well, thanks again for being here at the ArtBlocks pop-up. We have a great panel. We're going to be talking about DAOs today. Just to introduce people, I have Sarah Mehoyas from Fingerprints DAO. We have Aaron Wright, who's the co-founder of Tribute Labs XYZ and part of the Lao and Flamingo DAO. We have Rebecca Lamis, who's the CEO of Pussyverse, raising funds for a feminist DAO with Tribute Labs. And finally, we have Nadya Tolokonnikova, who's the co-founder of Pussy Riot. All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. I know everyone has a different, knowledge of what DAOs are, what they are, what they do. And so we're kind of just start very general and then hopefully open it up at the end, maybe for some questions if everyone's up for it. Maybe we can just go ahead and get started. And if someone doesn't mind just talking about what is a DAO.
Thanks so much for organizing this. Thanks, Eric, again, for the really kind words. It's really an honor to be on the panel with everybody here. DAOs are completely fascinating. I think what we're seeing is this amazing technology, blockchain technology and Web3, introducing new ways for people to work together online. I think for many of us, we spent our lives on the internet and we developed really meaningful relationships with other people, outside of our normal friend group. And really what you can do together is just chat. Maybe you meet occasionally online. But really, I think the core power of what a DAO is providing is that it gives a group online the ability to have a shared bank account. And that seems really subtle, but once you have some funding, once you have some capital, and once you're kind of knitted together through a passion or pre-existing relationships, you can really begin to do a lot more things together. That could be working together to support artists, that could be working together to make investments, that could be working together to build something. That could be, trying to, work together to make a difference in whatever corner or pocket of the world that you want. And I think that that's what we're beginning to see. And at the end of the day, when we zoom out like 10, 15, 20 years, I think we'll increasingly see DAOs as the vehicle in which the internet begins to take over the world. And I think that that's why it's such an important topic and really excited to talk about it.
Yeah. Does anyone have anything else to add? I guess that's pretty...
I think that sums it up pretty nicely.
Okay. What spoke to you, each of you individually, what spoke to you about DAOs that you're a part of today? Because I feel like everyone heard about DAOs, from someone different, or they learned about it through maybe projects that they're following. I'm just curious to know, like, how and why did you get into DAOs?
Yeah. So I was lucky enough to get into this space back in 2017. My dad actually introduced me. So I quickly started learning about DAOs because I found the model so fascinating, how similar it was to kind of this community-run cooperative model. And outside of Web3, I'd done a lot of mutual aid work, organizing work among kind of Philadelphia, DC. And kind of right off the bat, what made me so excited about blockchain was the application that you could use it in a way that involves DAOs for kind of a community-run and owned product, organization, et cetera. And I just found that DAOs were a lot more efficient than anything we see in today's traditional corporate America business model for really organizing a large community to build something incredible together.
Hi. I joined Fingerprints DAO when they collected my work. So Fingerprints DAO collects work that engages artwork, that engages in the concept of blockchain and smart contracts as artwork. And I had made a piece that I had started in 2014 called Bitcoin, which was originally a fork of Bitcoin that I had backed at a fixed rate by my photography called Speculation. So obviously in line that I had then converted to ETH, and that's a whole long story. But obviously was in line with the ethos of Fingerprints. And when they collected the work, I made the choice of also joining the DAO, which is not what usually happens in the art world, right? You're not joining your collector's club. And that speaks to how DAOs are really different organizations. And I'd also like to point out that, right, I have Bitcoin collectors and I haven't chosen to make a DAO out of Bitcoin because, there's a huge amount of work involved in making a DAO successful and lots of different skill sets. And so I chose to join Fingerprints rather than make my own DAO.
Oh, hi. My name is Nadya. I am one of those people who started Pussy Riot back in the days in 2011, spent 2 years in jail, and my passion was always to organize people to achieve social goals, different goals. My main goal is to get rid of Putin, My goal number 2, make sure that women are equal to men. Gender equality is a big part of what we do. And I refer to Pussy Riot as the first DAO ever. We started in 2011, and we confused a lot of people. We didn't have hierarchical structure. We didn't have president or curator, producer, manager. Didn't have any of that. And as a co-founder with my fellow co-founders, we never would want to, and never actually did have more power than other people. The only power we had is power of respect and power in a similar fashion that some people have, like Aaron has it in Flamingo, but he still has, this organization is really flat, and that allows people to feel ownership over everything they do, not necessarily financial ownership, but ownership over ideas. And like when you build a big people's movement, it's so important because you have nothing to offer them, especially material, when it comes to material side of things. Financially, you have nothing to offer them. The only one thing you can offer them really is to go to jail with you. And to make them really involved, you need to feel, and make them feel that they are equal members. And in that sense, Pussy Riot was the first DAO that we launched in 2011. And now we're working with Aaron and Pri and Rebecca on launching something exciting. I cannot talk in depth about that because it's not time yet. But the goal is pretty much the same. We're trying to deal with gender inequality and misrepresentation, underrepresentation of females and LGBTQ plus folks in crypto space. I found out that a lot of people actually want to help us and really bullish on what we're building, because what I love about crypto, people mostly here are really nice and a lot of visionaries who really want to build better future. And what we are doing is we're providing infrastructure to build feminist revolution on blockchain.
Did you want to talk? Okay.
I think that's super interesting, just all the perspectives. My first introduction to DAOs really began with another group of folks that wanted to change the world, and that was around the launch of Ethereum. I was fortunate enough to play a role in helping to launch Ethereum, and one of the core reasons why Ethereum was started was to explore this concept of DAOs. So just a quick history lesson, these notions of DAOs really began about 2013 in the Bitcoin ecosystem. People were beginning to think about how could we generalize Bitcoin to not just transfer money, but also other assets, and how can this amazing new technology called blockchain technology be used to coordinate more and more activity. And that germ of an idea, Vitalik Buterin, Joe Lubin, Gav Wood, and others really ran with to build a generalized platform. And from the beginning, when Ethereum was launched, this idea of using this technology to think about new ways to coordinate, new ways to have people work together online, really sits at the core of what Ethereum does. I also lived through the first great experiment with DAOs called the DAO, which was a spectacular failure, but completely spectacular, completely animated, and brought in a whole bunch of people into the space. And then people pretty much had PTS DAO and stopped even playing around with them as a concept. So about 2+ years ago, we were thinking about reviving the DAO itself as a concept, and so we launched a project called Allow, which was a revival of the original DAO concept with some new constraints, and some other teams were experimenting with it too, and now that's grown into a network of, I think, 11 DAOs as of today. So they're growing fast, but I think at the core, it's how people can do things together in different ways, and that's really important. It doesn't matter where you live, it doesn't matter what your background is, you have an opportunity to really work with people that care about things that you want. That could be a feminist revolution. I think many people would agree with that. Or it could be more narrow topics or more narrow concepts. So this is the organizational structure for the internet, and that's a big deal. And I think that's why we're going to hear a lot more about them over the next couple years.
Let me just pull. All right, so, well, I appreciate everyone talking a little bit about, what spoke to you about DAOs, like what you hope to achieve probably in the future. But, how do you decide who is a part of the actual DAO itself? Because I feel like, there are some DAOs that I'm a part of where I hold an NFT and it's like, cool, you're a part of this DAO. But then some of them, some people use them for like social tokens, or maybe some people use it for like raising capital. I'm just curious to know like how do you figure out like who do you want a part of the DAO, and then how do you reach out to those people? Like, I don't know about marketing, or I think I'm just curious to know like about those little parts for there.
You want to take it first? All right. Got it. Okay. I mean, the shapes of DAOs are still being formed. I kind of bucket them into 4 categories. There's a whole bunch of DAOs that are trying to manage smart contract-based systems, mostly around decentralized finance or DeFi, which you may have heard about. I kind of view them as modern open source foundations, so really important work, right? Very powerful technologies managed by not-for-profits today. They're still hierarchical, so people are exploring new ways to do it. There's a whole bunch of collector and or investment DAOs. They pool together capital. They try to create a return, but in a way that doesn't have an expert in charge, like a general partner, one of the eggheads from Silicon Valley or one of the bastards on Wall Street. So that's kind of the core concept around investor DAOs. But then there's other DAOs that are more like social clubs, right? So Friends with Benefits, Bright Moments. There's a whole bunch of really interesting ecosystems that are really bringing people together that are passionate about, let's say, internet culture or the intersection between art and the real world, like in Bright Moments. So the shapes are still being formed. How you get into a DAO, whether you get into a DAO, I don't think we fully know the answers. Some are more constrained, like people get invited in. Some you have to purchase an NFT. Some are completely open and permissionless. So I think over the next couple of years, and that's the challenge and the excitement, is how do we figure out how to shape these things? But in general, they're really flat, and I think that's one of the exciting parts about it.
Yeah, and I think I would add to that as well is, when you have an idea for your concept of whatever DAO it may be, the most important thing is to find like-minded people who want to work and achieve that as well. And really from there, you just start having conversations. You really get it going and figure out how you can achieve those goals together through this kind of decentralized I would say decentralized autonomous organization model, and how as a community, you can work to achieve whatever that kind of similar goal might be.
Fingerprints is a mix of a social club and also an art collection, right? But obviously has to make the claim that when you own tokens and you're part of Fingerprints, you don't actually own, the artworks. You have a vote and you have a say in the governance. But this is because, and Aaron can speak to all of this so much better than I can, but the legal status, right, of DAOs is very much a growing field. And as I think about DAOs, and I'm working on a movie right now, and I would love my executive producers to be a DAO, right? But it's tricky. Interfacing with the real world and the real legal system is tricky, and that's why what Aaron does is so crucial. But that's where I think the exciting thing for DAOs is. I think that this is the next form of organization, right? Is like cooperatives online. It allows us to communicate so easily. And so we need to be able to bridge the gap to the real world. And that includes like KYC, right? We need to be able to have ways that maintain privacy, where addresses can be KYC'd, to enable people to come together and do things that are not only on chain and totally anonymous. So that's where I stand?
Well, I'm just humbly cannot wait when nation states are going to be replaced by DAOs, because DAO can function so much more efficient. I believe so. That's it.
What exactly makes a DAO successful? You know, like what is the end goal? Like what exactly are you trying to achieve? And is there an end goal, or is it something where you're just gonna, you know, continue building and building, and then there's no end goal, but it's just like the group of people that you're a part of, or the, you know, the DAO that you're a part of, that, you know, you have this collective end goal, or yeah.
It sounds like one end goal is a revolution, so maybe that's a good end point. So a revolution and a new nation state. So that's an admirable goal, one that I am sympathetic to. I think they're organic. I think of DAOs as open source organizations. So we've seen lots of open source technology get developed. It's usually not developed in the same way as proprietary software. So if you're a software developer, you're working for Microsoft or Facebook, the feel of those platforms feels very different. Before, I did a lot in the blockchain ecosystem. I did a lot with Wikipedia. If you go to Wikipedia, it has a different feel than lots of the technology that comes out of Silicon Valley, right? It feels more organic. It's like maybe a little bit rough around the edges, but somehow it all kind of coheres and works better. And I think that's ultimately what the purposes of DAOs are. You know, when we start DAOs, our members tell us what they want to get what they're excited about, and then we support them around that initiative. So I do think having like a rough idea of what you want to do is probably a good place to start. Finding people that are interested in that topic. I've seen that DAOs serve as like a Schelling point, which is an interesting concept, which is just like a point of coordination on the internet, or just in general, where people really rally around a specific topic. So that's always helpful. And I do think that you need a lot of support. You can't just manifest these things out of thin air. I think a lot of people that are thinking about their projects are thinking about DAOs or using a DAO in some capacity, but in reality, they just need a company or normal startup. So, you know, just sprinkling the word DAO on something, or what we used to call blockchain pixie dust, is not going to actually make the project work. It has to be kind of right-sized and right-placed to work successfully.
Yeah, and I think what I found really interesting in 2021, when DAOs started to take off a little bit more in the norm, is you saw a lot of people who would tweet an idea and be like, I want to make a DAO to do X, Y, Z. And it would completely blow up, and a large community would come and kind of gather together around that concept. And, you know, sometimes it turned out like really quite incredibly and wonderfully. You know, I think of one as like City DAO being the first DAO to purchase real estate on chain. And that started as one guy sending out a tweet, and now 30,000 people are in that community. And then at the same time, you know, we see a lot of people who do that who maybe don't necessarily have kind of the bigger picture in mind or the end goal, and they have to fizzle out as a result. And it's, you know, it's so early at the end of the day that there's really no kind of clear answer to how to successfully form a DAO. But I think more than anything is like building your community and having the education to start a DAO and the resources to start a DAO is what is really going to help make it happen for you.
So Fingerprints started as a collection of autoglyphs, and then they added, you know, Bitcoins, they added, you know, Mitchell Chan, IKBs, they have the biggest Def Beef collection. So they started as a collection, but the beauty about DAOs is the fact that they're quite flexible, right, in their mission. And so eventually two things happen. One is they spun out another DAO called Raw DAO, which is focused on photography, and that's kind of amazing, right? Fingerprints has a very unique mission, and they could, you know, incubate another DAO. And then the other thing that we started doing was actually dropping and developing projects, which speaks to the fact that DAOs can, you know, bring together participants to work together to develop something. I'd also like to note that, so I'm also like an investor, and it's interesting because DAOs have also been the subject of like venture capital investment, and it always, and you know, has been quite a, you know, some DAOs have become right? The tokens of these DAOs have become worth a lot of money, and it like, I don't know, it gives me like an itch. I can't totally wrap my head around a DAO as like a venture investment, even though there are large profits in some of them, because it is a co-op. It's not a company, and I don't have an answer to this, and I don't think anybody else really does have an answer to it because it's a cooperative. But it's kind of funny to me. It's a funny thing to me.
I believe DAOs are a good reaction on the fact that a lot of people acknowledge that more traditional business and financial structures don't always work. And I felt it forever. So when I stepped into crypto, I felt for the first time that I can actually use financial tools provided by DeFi as my paints and brushes. And I feel like I can be part of it. I can be part of this movement as an artist. And before that, I was just totally rejected. Well, I'm someone who lived by shoplifting for 6 years because I rejected money. And when I started to hang in DeFi community, I figured that a lot of people want to burn banks as much as I want to burn them. And so I feel like we don't have definitive answers in all of these questions for sure, because it's a really turbulent soup, almost like the one from which the life was born. And like a lot of people with incredible minds and a lot of dissatisfaction with the way how current system runs. And I, as an artist and activist, I feel incredibly comfortable here. And for the first time, I started to realize that money does not equal evil. That's what I was thinking most of my life. So that's why I actually started to use financial tools, as it is a big stigma, especially it's a big problem among women, because we were taught that we're not supposed to care about that. We are just like these ethereal beings who are not supposed to ask about money and demand them. So that's why, in order to also work on myself and work on other girls who I see affected badly by this stigma, we're building this collector DAO. I think collector DAO makes a lot of sense and is, one of the most successful, I guess, models, because you put together a lot of great minds who know a lot about art, know a lot about market. And I think what we're building is really promising, because we're going to be focusing collecting female and LGBTQ plus people artworks. And those artworks are deeply undervalued. So coming back to question, like if it can be a good investment for VC or an individual, I think it definitely can. And this is one of the premises of our DAO. We want to show that buying female plus art is not a charitable act, it's an investment.
I actually got a question for everyone. How many people are a part of a DAO? Can you raise your hand if you are? All right. How many people are a part of more than 3 DAOs? All right. So the next question is, I'm a part of, maybe like 3 or 4 DAOs. Like, how do you stay relevant? I feel like there are so many, and more DAOs are being created, and like, is there ever a point where you might even consider combining forces with another DAO? And yeah, just how do you stay relevant with so many DAOs being out there?
It's a great question. There's definitely DAO fatigue. We've seen it. It's interesting. So we run a network of 11 DAOs. Flamingo DAO is probably the largest NFT collection out there. It's one of the largest holders of CryptoPunks, Autoglyphs, art blocks, a whole bunch of others. It's incredibly active. Literally, Pri and I were just noting this. Like, literally, step away from Discord, you go back 20 seconds later, and there's like a bunch of different messages. It can be pretty exhausting if you're really dialed in on it. And now we have 11 DAOs. They kind of run the gamut. So we've got the LAO, which is focused on supporting projects, and it's also kind of the DAO of DAOs. So it's seeded and actually incubated all the other DAOs. We also have a digital fashion DAO called Red, which is focused on supporting digital fashion designers. We have a music DAO called Noise, which is focused on supporting musicians. We have a metaverse DAO, which we did with the folks from Artifact, which is focused on the metaverse and items and other opportunities in terms of building these ecosystems up and these virtual worlds up. And then we put together a fake internet stable to race fake internet horses because we like to have a good time too. So it's a whole mix, but if you have a semi-short attention span, I actually think this is why DAOs may work. If you have a little bit of ADD, and I do, you can just kind of plug in different ways, and you can kind of keep your attention. But like anything online, if you spend too much time, don't get fresh air, you run the risk of burning out. What we found is just super fascinating. Some of our members have quit their jobs, and even though the DAOs haven't hired them, they spend all their time supporting and working on the DAOs. So to me, that seems like the future of work. Like, you may not actually have a boss. You may just go and work on things that you like in kind of a scattershot way, adding value where you actually can add value. But if you want some free time, you want to move, you want to go somewhere else, you can kind of unplug, and nobody's really kind of watching over you in some capacity. So those types of models I think are not fully clear yet, but I find really interesting. And that is how I think we can actually, and I think this is the endpoint of crypto. It's not really about money, it's about value, right? It's like, what value are you providing? There's no, people provide value, just state money may be the bad thing, right? But social currencies, social communities, other things that you are providing value and can give back, and you can support yourself. I mean, I think that's the real end goal for what, at least why I got into crypto, and I think why others do as well.
Yeah, and to add to that, I often think that some of the strongest DAOs are the ones that create opportunities for their members to come in and out of the DAO with how active they are participating. It's really important that, we all burn out if we get too involved in some DAOs. So they have to create those opportunities to come in and out. And what you see happen as a result is people flow in and out as they get to also work on other DAOs and different projects that they're more passionate about. And when their DAO is focusing on something that they're so excited for, they can jump in and commit that time. And so, the DAOs that have figured that out and have figured out how to allow multiple people to be working on different projects, coming in and out, not necessarily committing the same time one week versus the next, I really feel are going to be some of the most successful ones, because it allows them to retain their members in a kind of long-term capacity.
Hate going third. like said, how the good. I feel like NFTs sort of got the attention before DAOs, right? And but then NFTs transition, and we all started thinking about community, right? It's shocking, right? In the real world, we're not all about community all the time, and in crypto, we're all about community all the time. And it's kind of because in the normal world, there are all sorts of other networks of kinship, of your place and your job. You have all these ties, and when you're in crypto, you have none of those ties, right? None of those ties can exist. And so the only tie that you create is by actually, displaying work and warmness. I feel like people in DAOs are more friendly than in real life, because maybe I'm wrong, maybe I haven't spent enough time, but I think that's part of the way the engagement is created. That if you're not nice, right, you're not bound. The community doesn't have to you don't have to. There are no other ties. So that's a very amorphous point to make, but I think it's true.
I'm fairly relaxed about participation in DAOs because I feel like if they're they're being formed around an idea or a feeling or a goal that's strong enough, that's just going to make it no matter what. And it's like that's the beauty of DAOs because they're much more organic than traditional corporate structure. So me and Rebecca were trying to build a traditional corporate structure, never done it before in my life, and it's like that's an interesting undertaking. I do not recommend everyone to try to do that. I mean, like this is really effective in the end of the story, but it's pretty rigid still. So DAOs, while they have their like sides, there are situations when they're less effective, but I think if they're actually revolved around idea that organically excites a lot of people, you don't have to be worried so much about your participation every day there, and that's the beauty of them. And again, I'm going to bring an example from my own life. Wright started to become a really global movement once we were arrested in 2012. And right now I can spend prolonged periods of times in whatever country I want, but I know that there are groups of people on the ground working in Moscow and some other places in Russia, and they're organizing actions because they believe in what we fight for. They are willing to risk their lives. They feel ideas over ownership and, if you will, brand that we created, and they're willing to risk their lives and their freedom for that. And I think ideally, so the DAO that we're going to build, it's going to be like that, but ideally without jail for its members. But I want to see the same amount of passion that's not manufactured. I feel like when in traditional corporate structure, it's manufactured passion, it's manufactured involvement, and in DAO it's much more organic. So as an artist, as an activist, I feel it.
Next question is, there's obviously a lot that goes into building a DAO. There's a lot of people, a lot of resources that go into it. I was talking to some people a bit earlier on, and they were talking about they wanted to start their own DAO. Like, what goes into making a DAO? Like, what kind of resources do you need? I was thinking about it the other day because it's almost tax season. Like, how are taxes, potentially involved when you sell a piece of art and then there's, dozens or hundreds of people in a DAO? I'm just kind of curious, as far as like starting, and then I think a lot of people don't understand like how much time and resources go into it.
It's a great question. It's not easy to start any community, and if you're taking this kind of community first approach and focusing, like Rebecca was mentioning before, on building out that community, it takes work, right? It's not going to be instant satisfaction. It takes time to build up something, especially something that's pretty emerging from the ground up. In terms of the technology to do it, it's getting better. There's lots of tools that are currently available to people to set up their own DAO if they want it. The company that we run, we handle all these points, from setup to the tax and compliance to kind of everything in between. So we joke that we're like a reverse mullet. We handle all the business in the back, so people can have a party in the front, which is a little corny, I know, but I like it, and I'm going to stick with it. And but I think it's important, and there's lots of questions. I'm sure more and more tools will kind of emerge. But if you're thinking about starting a DAO, that's amazing. Don't feel discouraged, but just know that you're going to have to put work into it, right? You're building something, and primarily it should be a community. Actually, what you were saying before, Nadya, just about organizations, it made me realize something. I don't think DAOs are that great for sociopaths like they are in corporations. So that's probably why they're more effective, and maybe why they have like a better long-term goal, because you're kind of leaning on a group instead of like this top-down hierarchy. So it's not easy. Lots of questions. You should definitely try to get up to speed on the latest tooling. There's a whole bunch. And then some of these more difficult questions, you may have to just talk to people that have either gone through it or have answered it in some capacity.
Yeah, and to add to that, I really kind of think of two things are necessary for building a DAO. One, as kind of Aaron talked about, is the community. That's just so vital to build the resources and the objectives of the DAO. But before you even get there, you have to educate yourself. I think a lot of DAOs in this space the core members don't necessarily fully understand the different opportunities and models for DAOs and the resources associated to building a DAO. And as a result, they just are not where they need to be when they launch the DAO. And as a result, the community suffers. And so I think, we're so new in this space that unfortunately there isn't like an enormous amount of toolkits. But as a result, you should really, I would encourage you to take the time just talking to people, mentors, learning about this space, understanding it, reading all the articles you can from leading DAOs in this space, and it'll help you better understand and envision what your DAO possibly could be before you even build that community.
And you don't have to make a DAO, right? I just came here from a Bitcoin meetup where a whole bunch of Bitcoin holders met up, and we, had food, and it was sponsored by Fingerprints, right? And so I get to have a community, but there was no point in having it be decentralized, because my practice as an artist is not decentralized. I make the work myself, and I have a community. But Fingerprints is a DAO because they're building a collection, launching products, launching projects, creating other DAOs, etc. So community and DAO does not need to be synonymous, and delivering value and engagement to the people who you're in touch with, does not always need to be a DAO. You can token gate things too.
Trippy is one of people who started FreeROS DAO. That's one of the dopest DAOs that then later became a model for Free Assange DAO. And this is a great example on how DAOs can be used for liberation. That's it.
I got one more question, and then I want to open it up for anyone that has some questions. So if they want to ask a question, maybe we can probably take like 2 questions. If you want to just line up over here. And we'll go ahead and move forward with that after this question. So I'm curious to know about the future of DAOs. Right now, I think a lot of it is about building, about figuring out what you want to build around. But what do you think is going to be the impact on like the greater society? I think that a lot of people just don't understand crypto NFTs right now, so it's really challenging for a lot of people to just wrap their head around that. And then to learn about DAOs, it's like that's like a whole nother can of worms. So I'm just curious to know, like, what are your thoughts on the future of DAOs? Like, how can we get people involved into DAOs like on a bigger scale?
I think the future of DAOs is incredibly bright. The internet does not yet have an organizational form. At every major technological era, there's been some new form of organization that's emerged. So if you go back to the industrial era, that was the birth of the corporation. That happened in New York in 1811. It transformed how we organized entire nations, how we organized commerce and society. In the late 1970s, the same thing happened with LLCs. So they were invented in Wyoming. They seeped out. They changed the way Wall Street operated. There was no hedge funds before the LLC. They really changed the way Silicon Valley operated. There was no venture capital funds, or not the same degree, until an LLC. And they changed the way Hollywood operated. So huge portions and systems that impact your life are deeply impacted by the core organizational form. The internet is pervasive. We're going through a generational shift right now, but in the next 20 years, the power of the internet is only going to increase. And at this point, it has fuel being placed on it, which is crypto, right? Crypto is providing capital that's native to the internet, to these peer-to-peer systems that we began to emerge. That is going to change the way all organizations operate. So we're kind of in the first inning of exploring what that looks like. And the early evidence is these things work better than existing organizations, at least in some categories. So the DAOs that we put together, which are more collective and investment focused, they seem to be performing as well, if not better, than Silicon Valley or hedge funds. And if you have better organizations, they win in the long run. So what does that mean? Bitcoin really provides a kind of a check on central banks. We've seen DeFi and Ethereum begin to provide a check on Wall Street. And DAOs, I think, ultimately are going to provide checks on other powerful systems like Silicon Valley, like hedge funds and asset managers, like the way media is produced and consumed. And that's really a huge thing. And then beyond that, I think we don't know exactly what the final shape will look like, except maybe outside of Nadya, who knows that it'll be a nation state, which I don't necessarily disagree with. So maybe that's the end point. But I think the areas in between, it's too soon to tell, right? If we were in 1994 talking about the internet, we wouldn't have been able to predict the impacts of social media. And I think this technology is very powerful. It's the core reason why blockchains are useful. And the end point of what they look like, I think we're just going to have to muddle and experiment with. So until we see its kind of final form.
Yeah, and to add to that, kind of as Aaron notes, is, we're really just in our infancy of DAOs on a global level. And I think more than anything as well is as globally, I would say economic systems become more comfortable with DAOs and the model of DAOs and the DeFi tools that they bring in to really successfully operate an organization, we're going to see legislation internationally become more comfortable and accepted. And so I think that's going to play a really big role over the next decade in particular, is how Congress and beyond becomes more comfortable and more, I would say, allowing of DAOs and NFTs and DeFi legally within the US and beyond.
And, Aaron talked about, right, the history of different organizations. And I was reading about how we measure time really affected like how the world worked, right? The mechanical clock changed everything. And then, people being on the same times, different time zones existing and people being on the same calendar, like that led to sort of the organizations that we know today. And, blockchain fundamentally is a different paradigm, like is an innovation of time again. It's time stamping, right? And time stamping means that we can do this all. So, yeah, it's part of a historical progression. And so I do think that we're going from more traditional organizations to protocols and DAOs as a function of our measurement of time changing.
Okay, I'm excited about ways how DAOs can show us how to implement elements of direct democracy in our everyday lives. And that can be challenging as hell. And as a member of Pleaser DAO, I was watching a lot of growing pains and just the way how do you make everyone vote when it's really important to vote in the next 24 hours, but everyone is busy. Obviously, we have like all sorts of problems, but it's so exciting for me as an activist to see finally elements of direct and liquid democracy being implemented in our everyday lives, because it terrifies me. It terrifies me that we still live in a representative democracy that was built a few centuries ago, and I mean, like we don't really like have any tools to vote about what's happening around us. So what really grabbed my attention when I had a conversation, it's available on YouTube, with Vitalik Buterin, my fellow Russian. He said that we can actually use blockchain as tools that will allow us to vote much more often about what is kind of environment that we live in. And he brought in an example of, I mean, we can vote about the color of this building that in our neighborhood, or like what kind of advertisement we want to see at the Times Square, because currently it's like solely defined by money. It's not defined by people who live around. Like we have nowhere to say about it. So different governance models is definitely is what I'm all about, and that's the reason why I'm so excited about DAOs. And also, like, if you look at Estonia, they've been using it for a second, the cloud democracy or liquid democracy, where citizens can actually vote on a daily basis on a number of things that influence their lives. And I think we have these tools, we have internet, like we have these phones on us all the time, but we don't use it. That's insane. I think blockchain is here to change it.
All right, we're going to open it up to questions. I believe you had a question? No? Okay. You might want to stand over here just because I don't know.
Sorry, you might have answered it, but I'm curious about, I'm really new at DAOs, just barely tapping here. Is there a cross-section between DAO and local government? And what does that look like?
Yeah, so you asked about the kind of cross of local government in DAOs currently. This is actually kind of the passion of mine in this kind of community, and DAOs in particular, is how you have the ability to really organize local governance in a way that we haven't seen previously, from a more kind of community-run model where your vote, it's not just a vote for a legislative individual, it's a vote for kind of deciding as a community where the funds are going. And so I think, it doesn't necessarily exist yet. There are a lot of projects that are starting to build it, and I am very excited over the next 10 years as we're going to see this kind of organizational model implemented on a much more local governing level. I think it could really, honestly, be a game changer.
All right, and we got one more question over here.
Awesome. Thank you, panel. It's been great. Some love for Ponyo. A little bit of love for the MC of the night. Panel, my question, there's a number of folks here who maybe are not familiar with DAOs. This might be their first exposure. They've heard of DAOs. They're not involved. How do they get involved with DAOs? What's the best way to gain some level of involvement? How do they start researching DAOs and get involved and be part of this movement that we're all trying to build? Thank you.
Who wants to start?
I mean, you could, I actually think going into Discord and asking questions is probably the most effective way. Like, I feel like my early Discord conversations with totally random people I don't know, I learned so much. So yes, there are resources online, but going in and, a lot of DAOs, it depends. Some of them are totally private, but the ones that are public, you can just go and see what people are chatting about. And there are usually resources for those that kind of guide you directly. I don't know.
Just participate. I think it's find a community that you're interested in. If they're organizing, maybe it's a proto DAO or just something really loose, join Discord, offer to help out. I mean, that's a really great way to do that. I did that with Ethereum, which is, I guess, DAO-like. I thought it was a really cool project. I reached out to Joe Lubin and said, how can I help? And he's like, here's things to work on. And the rest is kind of history. So I think just being helpful is a pretty great way to think about any online community, whether that's an open source project, whether that's a DAO, whether that's a larger blockchain project. People that are interested in the same things that you're interested in, you'll have a natural affinity for, and you'll probably have a better time than you otherwise would, putzing around on Reddit or wherever else you're spending your time.
Well, thank you to the panel. I want to thank Aaron, Sarah, Rebecca, and Nadya for being here today. I really appreciate it. Special thanks to Patrick, Scott, and Eric for helping put this event together.